Hello and welcome everyone to the Three Circle Church podcast. I am Pastor Jonathon Duke from the Daphne campus here again as our host today, and we've decided to dub this duo because this is now our third appearance on the podcast together. I have with me Pastor Jourdain Thrash from the Fairhope campus, and we're going to just refer to this from now on as like J Squared. Is that what we're calling it?
J Squared.
J Squared back on the podcast again.
That's it.
And we're excited because we both had the honor of teaching this past weekend, but it was a little bit different for us for a change in that we kind of switched spots. So Jourdain operates primarily out of the Fairhope campus and does a great job there. And then, of course, me being at the Daphne campus, well, this week we switched. I was down at Fairhope teaching, and you were up at your old stomping grounds.
That's right.
Daphne campus.
Cut my teeth in ministry.
You cut your teeth, yeah. You were the student pastor there. How many years were you up there?
They brought me in 2016. So
2016.
I think 5 years doing student ministry.
Through like 2021 probably?
2020, 2021, yeah.
Yeah. I remember that because right as I came on, you were transitioning. He was smart. He got out of the Daphne campus right before I got there.
Yeah, I heard wind of this guy named Jonathon and was like, well, now's as good a time as any, I guess.
Well, the good news is he doesn't have to work for me, so we're able to be friends, and
That's
it's
right.
great, and we enjoy working together. And the cool thing is, as we kind of tackle the teaching responsibilities at Three Circle as a team, even most of the campus pastors and Pastor Chris, we do get to collaborate on the teaching and exchange notes and ideas and kind of the direction that we're going. And so love working with you and being able to do that. And
J Squared.
J Squared, man, yeah. So today we're going to go, like we've been going each and every week, beyond the weekend, kind of diving in a little bit deeper, some of the content that we're not able to throw into a 30-minute segment on a Sunday morning, and kind of dig a little deeper into all that. And, both of us kind of tackled this week with that authority that Jesus has over our purpose and our mission in life, right? Yeah. And so just tell me kind of a general idea where you went with that whole concept this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, for me, this weekend was almost part two to the weekend before.
Right.
I think the main point that I had made was God's purpose for our lives is twofold. He wants to produce change in you, and he wants to produce change through you. And so those things kind of going hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other, was my approach. And so I kind of followed up with Pastor Chris's teaching and just pretty much said, like, hey, Jesus doing this stuff in you and making you more like Christ is not his end goal. Like, we're not meant to be mannequins that are on display to the world of what the Christian life looks like. Like, we're supposed to go out and do it. And so, I kind of tackled that. And I think you and I, we both hit the Great Commission.
Yep.
And I love, gleaning from one another, learning from one another.
Yeah.
I got your notes, and I love that you went all the way back to verse 16 about him that I worshiped.
Right.
Because that kind of like tied it in for me. And then, we just kind of went through and looked at, hey, how do we fulfill this thing that is called the Great Commission? What does that look like in our lives? And then also, I think we both tagged on this. I have to go back and watch yours. I kind of feel bad because you saw mine on Thursday.
I did. I got to watch yours live.
We also tagged on the community aspect.
Yep.
That community is really important for the believer. And I referenced Acts 2:42 through 47, which is actually the passage that young adults was birthed out of.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty cool to get to talk through that and kind of hopefully inspire some of our congregates to take that next step in their faith and share the gospel.
Yeah, I loved it. It was so cool, man, because you grab different things from the same passage of scripture, and yet you're kind of working that same angle, if you will, of what the topic is for the week and what we're trying to communicate. And what was neat is I went back to verse 16, and for me it was definitely to highlight the fact that they worship Jesus, but even in going to that mountain, they had to be obedient, right? They had to do what Jesus told them to do and go where Jesus told them to go. But my favorite part of the text is that it said the disciples showed up, they saw Jesus, they worshiped Jesus, but they still doubted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how could that happen? Like, this is the resurrected Jesus at this point. This is the crucified in the grave 3 days, and this isn't their first time seeing him, right? This would have been a repeat occurrence of them, spending more time with Jesus. And so I wonder, what did they doubt? Like what was a doubt in their mind at that point when they're standing in front of the resurrected, glorified, Jesus there in his presence? But I was like, you know what? I know enough about me I'd be in the same boat.
Oh yeah, dude, for sure.
Right? Like
For
I've been in
sure.
ministry. I have tried to faithfully serve the Lord and have seen miracles and I have seen incredible things happen. And I would still doubt,
Oh yeah,
even if
dude.
Jesus was standing in front of me.
100%.
And but Jesus does. He even in the midst of their doubt, he's aware of their doubt,
Mm-hmm.
but he gives them marching orders. He
Yeah.
says, "This is what I need you to be about. You're going to be my disciples who are going to go out into the world, and you're going to make other disciples, and you're going to baptize them, and you're going to teach them, and all these things." My favorite thing, and I did steal this from you because I got to watch you on Thursday.
Oh, nice.
You said, "In order to teach, you have to know." Right?
Yeah.
You have to know. And I thought that was so powerful because it's one of those things that the way I say it is like it's so obvious that you're jealous you didn't come up with it yourself, but it's one of those things that as a follower of Christ, you hear something like that and it's profound and yet obvious. And so the obvious part of that is like, yeah, if we're going to share about Christ, we need to have that personal experience with him, right? And that's where, here at 3 Circle, we talked about, you reach in to grow,
Yeah.
right? And I know you got kind of a neat story about you really feeling the burning passion to share the gospel, in the early days of your faith,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of coming up on this whole idea of you not being as prepared as you wished you were at that moment, right?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, we don't want to advocate that you have to be an expert in any way in order to share the gospel, but it is important to be growing in your understanding, growing in your knowledge, and
sure.
things like that, right? And so if you don't mind, can you give us like the
like a
quick
snip-
version?
Yeah. And I think I mentioned this in one of the gatherings. So the cool thing, and you, of course, have experienced this, is when you get to teach at multiple gatherings, when you get to that last one, you can teach longer, And so
the director's cut.
Yeah, there's the director's cut. That's right. And so the second gathering at Daphne, the third time I preached, I was like, I'm just going to tell this story. Yeah. So when I first gave my life to Christ, man, like I was on fire for Jesus, which I still am, but it was like that newness.
Oh yeah.
And I was just determined to share the gospel. But I was also in the wrong mindset because I didn't have the determination to share the gospel with anyone. Like I wasn't just like going to my neighbor. But I was like looking for like the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I was at Bishop State University and I was taking American history, and we had a exchange student from Saudi Arabia, and I was tutoring him in American history because I kind of had an advantage in that over him. And yeah, right.
It makes sense.
Yeah, right. And so I'm getting to know him, and him and his brother and his wife, they're all living here in the U.S. while he's going to school for petroleum engineering, and then he plans on moving back to Saudi Arabia, and so and their whole family was Muslim. They practiced Islam, and so I was like, this is it. I'm going to share the gospel with this guy. This is my calling, right? And so I was prepping it and getting everything ready as far as like building the relational side of things, and then finally we set up a time together where we were going to go off school and like hang out and do some homework. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to share the gospel. And so we set up a little meet and greet kind of thing over some food, and I met him there. And when I got there, he had 3 other friends with him, all who practiced Islam. And so I started having a conversation with them, and I was like, where are you guys from? And they actually started telling me where they were from, but they were telling me the ancient biblical towns it was near. And they're like, you know where that is, right? And I was like, no.
Schooling you.
And they just proceeded to school me in Old Testament Bible knowledge. And in that moment, I realized I had all of the zeal and passion in the world to share the gospel with this young man. I had 0 prep work done. Yeah.
Well, and what God was probably teaching you, in the midst of that situation was you were actually trying to share the gospel for your benefit.
Yeah.
Right? Like you wanted that individual on your list, on your resume.
Sure,
right?
dude. I wanted to be like, yep,
I led that guy to Jesus,
That's right.
And what's funny is we often, I think that sets up perfectly kind of what our mindset can slip into if we're not careful. And we kind of have this like, oh, I'll share the gospel with those people because, it gets me motivated, or because it may be easier, or whatever. I want to embrace the challenge, whatever your motivation is, whatever speaks your language, right? We'll get fired up about those things, and we'll come up with a 1,000 excuses to not share the gospel with the person who lives next door to us, or with that family member, because we've always got tomorrow with those
right.
people. And we put it off, and we come up with all these reasons to explain away the responsibility we have to make disciples. And so I think it's important for us to have experiences like the one that you share, and hopefully, we're able to help other people that are listening
Yeah.
not walk through the same thing. We don't want you to be scared of sharing the gospel.
Not at all.
But we want you to have the mentality of there is a person in close proximity to you that you have the task and responsibility of revealing the gospel of Jesus to them. And so we can't give you an out for that responsibility. I can't give myself an out for that responsibility. And really, like, I had this interesting experience happen between me and my neighbor, and my physical neighbor. We were working together for a few days on a project, and I didn't really know where he stood from a faith perspective. And we had a very brief, like one conversation exchange prior to this little work project we were doing together. And I had a misunderstanding of what he believed or what he thought or whatever. And so God stuck me next to him for 3 days where we're working on this project in our yards. And I'm with him all this time, and God just kept convicting me. I mean, day after day of hours and hours of doing this. I'm like, God's like, you going to talk to him yet? And I was like, no, God, I got tomorrow. I've got the next day that we're going to get together to do this project. And I kept kind of trying to rationalize, oh, he's my neighbor. I can wait till the next time. And God just really spoke to my heart and was like, yeah, but when's the last time you're going to, or, when's the next time you're going to get this guy exclusively one-on-one for multiple days, for multiple hours each day, where you can have a conversation that amount of depth about his relationship with Christ. Yeah. And so finally, like, we're doing this project, and I get to the point, I'm like, look, man, I was like, I just need to talk to you about, kind of the sentence you said to me that one time, and I really like to know what you think about the whole Christianity thing and Jesus thing, and all that kind of stuff, and kind of just setting up an open-ended conversation for him to kind of share with me what he believed. And it was the coolest thing. He's like, oh man, I love Jesus. And he's like, we're Christians, we believe it. And he goes into this whole detail about his personal relationship with Jesus. And so for me, I was like, I've been worried for like a year about where you stood from a gospel standpoint, just because I didn't have clarity. Yeah. And yet I was so chicken to have the conversation with the guy, if I'm going to be honest, that God forced me into this situation where it's like, you're going to be with him for a ton of time. And will you take advantage of that opportunity? Mm-hmm. And honestly, I'll be just completely transparent. I was like, I can't stand up in front of a church if I don't do this, because I'm going to lose all moral authority on the issue of having gospel conversations. And so, it's been a neat story, that encounter with him, and kind of getting clarity on what his beliefs were and his relationship with Christ and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, we have this responsibility, and I love. We definitely went down the Great Commission passage in Matthew 28, but we also dove into that verse that is like, man, the anthem for Three Circle, the verse that gets us fired up, keeps the gas in the engine, Acts 1:8, right? That's right. And Jesus basically, in that final encounter with his disciples, says, you're going to receive the Holy Spirit, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth.
That's right.
I like the to the ends of the earth part, right? It sounds epic.
It really does.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you're going to sign up for Christianity, you want the epic part too.
Well, I saw a meme, and it said 10 out of 10 guys would quit their day job to like go on an epic quest. Oh
yeah.
And so like I feel like that kind of almost speaks to something that's like in all of our hearts. Like we want to do something.
Yeah,
like
it's like it's I don't know if I have the right word for it, but almost like medieval. Like this conquering the
for sure.
And so
it's
I don't
in the ring to Mordor.
Yeah, awesome reference there. But no, for me, I don't know if it's just a guy thing, but I'm gonna tip my hat to the ladies. I think it's a ladies thing too, where it's like. You want to be part of the epic part of the story, right? We want to embrace the adventure. We want to embrace the large scale nature of things. And I think when we read that verse, we're like, yes, let me go grab my luggage. I'll pack it full of whatever I need. Oh, yeah. I'll hop on whatever plane you need me to hop on, and we're going to go share the gospel on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, dude.
And being in ministry, of course, we've had the opportunity to travel to some places, to do ministry in some places. And, I've been to Romania, and I've been to Costa Rica, and I've been to Peru. Right now I spend, a little time almost every year in Peru. Yeah. Because I love, the ministry work that's happening there and being able to support the guys in ministry there. And those things are great. Like it's cool to travel some cool places. I know you've been to some cool ones too. What are some places that you've been to?
We did Moldova and Ukraine. So
I can't even pronounce that, but that's awesome.
yeah. So I did the Eastern Bloc. I've definitely done the Central America, a handful of countries there. I think the big one is we did a backpacked through Greece through when the Syrian refugee crisis kicked off back in 2016, and we were going into the refugee camps during the gospel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and those things are great. Like, it's
yeah.
great. But what you end up finding out for the most part, at least from my experience, is that you spend less time being able to, like, specifically share the gospel with another individual while you're there.
Yeah.
And it ends up being more like supporting your brothers and sisters in Christ that are boots on the ground doing the work there. And that's why I love a lot of the partnerships that we have at Three Circle that are global partnerships are really helping and supporting people who are on the ground, boots on the ground, doing the work, right?
Yeah.
And what's neat is, like, we can definitely go and we can serve and we can be a blessing and an encouragement in those environments. But I'll tell you this, it is hard in a foreign context with foreign language to get to a point, even relationally, where people will take the time to hear what you have to say to them about Jesus. So we have to build rapport, and you have to do all those things. And so I have a huge respect and appreciation for people who feel called to the mission field, who feel called to leave, the United States and travel overseas and share the gospel and do ministry work. But I think we would be mistaken if we didn't say, that is a challenging task, right? That's a huge undertaking when we take on that responsibility. And so, one of the things I kind of leaned into on Sunday was, hey, we got this whole idea of, like, pack my bags and travel to the other side of the planet. But again, you've got some place where God has put you right now where you need to be all about sharing the gospel, right? Yeah. And so, for me, man, I'd love to hear, like, what is something cool that you've seen where, like, the gospel was shared and life was changed, but, man, it wasn't the other side of the planet. It was more like right here in your backyard.
Yeah, dude. Well, actually, so Angel and I, we have a story that we tell, and I always say that this was our favorite part of our wedding, right? Which is wild because our favorite part of our wedding wasn't getting married.
Yeah, I know this story. It's not what you would expect.
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect. So we were having our rehearsal dinner, and one of the things that Angel and I really loved and still love is Dragonfly. Amen.
You talking about the restaurant?
Oh, I'm talking about the restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Because the insect, I'm not a big fan of.
Not a big fan of dragonflies, they are. Right?
They're all right. They're fine.
They don't bite you.
The food at Dragonfly Restaurant.
Yeah.
On point.
On point, right? Shout out Dragonfly. But we really love Dragonfly. And so my mom was doing our rehearsal dinner, and we actually had Dragonfly cater for us. And so the owner of Dragonfly, Doug Kerr, shows up. He has a worker with them. And they set everything up. They serve the food, all of this stuff. My mom walks up to Doug at the end with check in hand. And, like, mind you, Dragonfly for, like, that many people, it ain't cheap. Right? Like, we're talking like 40 people. And my mom goes to hand Doug the check. And he's like, no, it's on us. And mom's like, no. And, like, Doug's like, no, like, seriously, like, this is on us. Like, we love your son. We love your daughter-in-law. Like, it's on us. And so the story that I'm told is how this goes is after that, the guy that was with Doug, who was helping Doug set up, was just like floored. Like, why would you, like, waive a ticket that
big? So
big?
This is Doug's employee.
This is Doug's
person
employee.
There helping him.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
Why would you waive that? And they're in the truck after they're leaving the venue, and he asked Doug that question, and Doug responds with something along the lines of, because of what was freely given to me. And Doug shares the gospel with the guy.
Let's go.
In the parking lot of the rehearsal dinner. And so it's just this beautiful story of something that took place that's eternal. Like, our wedding, we love, like, was great. Angel and I love one another. But, like, that marriage isn't eternal. Like, we'll be in heaven eternally. But what happened in the parking lot of the rehearsal dinner was eternal.
Right.
Because that gospel proclamation and the acceptance of the gospel led to that young man's eternity.
So you thought Doug was trying to bless you guys as you were newlyweds getting started in your marriage, and he's really just teeing up a gospel opportunity.
Yeah.
The whole time.
The
you
whole
were just
time.
part of a grand scheme.
And honestly, man, that's the coolest. That's the coolest thing
right.
for us.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we look back at our wedding and everything, the honeymoon, all of that, and that's the story we always find ourselves telling.
And I joke, Doug definitely wasn't working an angle there.
Oh,
but,
yeah,
but
no.
what's crazy is God was.
Hey,
Right? God was working an angle there.
yeah.
God's like, hey, you don't even know how I'm teeing this up, but watch what's about to go down.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up a huge point, because what Doug did do is he took advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. He took advantage of a open door that God just teed up for him to say, hey, all the things are in place here for you to have a conversation with this guy who works with you. And so don't miss it. Don't miss that opportunity and take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And I tell you, one of the things that has happened to me is I have walked with Christ for a few years now, and you go through different stages, right? Like I remember really committing myself as a Christ follower in high school. And so you go through that phase, and then you go through college, and then you go through post-college, marriage, and all these kind of things. And now we've lived in different states and different cities and all that kind of stuff. And what has become more and more a reality to me is there is a growing list of people in my life that I will never have the opportunity to share the gospel with them again.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Where I missed the opportunity. And some of those genuinely bother me, right?
Yeah.
Some of those I have prayed, God, give me one more shot, give me one more opportunity. And I've been thankful that God has allowed me to have some opportunities to have additional conversations with some of those individuals. But then there's some that like I literally don't even know how to get in contact with them. You think about people you went to school with, there's some people you can't even track down. They don't have social media or whatever it is. And it's like, I don't know where that person is and what's going on in their life. But man, I could have shared the gospel with them, back when I was sitting next to them in class every day or whatever it was. And I think, for us, again, taking advantage of those opportunities. And for me, and I've got a story I'd love to share. I've shared it at a men's conference that we had here at Three Circle, but haven't really shared it on the podcast. But one of the things that I'm also regretful for is that I have, on occasion, written people off as I don't know that the gospel will have an impact on them. And that's sad. And I'm trying to grow and mature in that. But especially early on in the early years, you come across some people and you're like, I don't know if they're worth me sharing the gospel with them, because I don't know that it's going to have any impact and do any good.
Yeah.
And sadly for me, it was my stepfather. And my stepfather, I again, in high school, really got serious about my faith and committed myself to living for Christ. And at the time, my stepfather was a good man. He was probably the best as far as, what you would want in a stepfather. As far as, from a parenting perspective, I always admired how he parented. But the Achilles heel for him, the thing that he wrestled with the most was alcoholism. And he battled it and battled it and battled it. And it progressively got worse in his life. And so if you ever hear me talk about that kind of stuff, that's where that comes from is I'd go home every day and I would see him, passed out, or I would see him, drunk, to a just embarrassing level. And so this was every day of, especially my late teenage years into my early adult years. And it got really bad. He ended up getting pulled over, was intoxicated, had to go before a judge. They order him to rehab. All these things occur in his life. And still none of that worked. And so at that point, I had just thrown up my hands. I was like, there's nothing that's going to help him. I don't know how to help him. I don't know what else to do. And I was a pastor in ministry at this time. And I was just throwing up my hands. I don't know what else to do. And I can't remember exactly how the story goes. I really need to revisit it with him. But from what I understand, he ended up in Birmingham at some point in time and ended up in like a men's homeless shelter type situation in Birmingham.
Wow.
And in that situation, they shared the gospel with him and he gets saved and never touches a drop of alcohol ever since. And now this has been over 10 years.
Wow.
And so I'm the pastor over here going, hey, Mom, I don't know how you're going to move forward in this relationship. I don't know what we can do. I don't know what's going to help this guy. I never really shared the gospel with him either, though, if I'm going to be honest. And he ends up in this situation. They share the gospel with him. He goes to church all the time now, reads his Bible daily now, takes my entire family back home to church all the time now, is involved in like their men's ministry and all this kind of stuff. And this is the same guy, right, that I had written off that I thought was hopeless. And yet the gospel changed him. And it was just the punch in the face that God gave me of like, don't you ever think that someone is too far gone for the gospel to have an impact on their life, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm sitting over here convicted right now.
I know, man.
Right?
I was like, it still convicts me. It was, 12 years ago or whatever. And I remember seeing him for the first time. It was surreal seeing him for the first time, completely sober and completely on fire for God. It was such a contrast that it made me uncomfortable.
Wow.
I was like, I don't know what to do with this guy. This is a new human. And so it's been neat, our relationship over the years and just getting to know him and seeing, and like I said, he was always a good dude. He just didn't know Jesus and didn't live for Jesus.
Yeah.
And so when he's the full package now, good dude who loves Jesus and is serving Jesus and, is a respectable guy on top of all of that. Just a neat part of a testimony of what God can do. And I take the liberty to share his testimony. He's one of those quiet guys. He's never going to share his testimony himself.
Right.
So it's like, you're not getting a pass. Your stepson's a preacher. So it's going to get woven in every now and then.
Yeah. Everything's a sermon illustration.
Right?
So
especially for us, right?
Yeah,
you gotta figure out how to weave it in there. And so for me, man, I know this week we talked about the authority that Jesus has over our mission and our purpose. But I think the real honest thing that we need to be aware of it's his mission. We are taking on his mission. And so, man, I'd love to just kind of finish this thing out today by asking you, when we surrender ourselves to the mission of Jesus, what would you say are some things that either you personally or just kind of in general are some things that we have to set aside to say, this is your mission and I am going to be committed to your mission, but man, there's some things I need to get out of the way. What would you say are some of those things?
Man, that's a really good question.
Hey, but you're qualified.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. What do I need to set aside to step into that mission? So I think one of the things is pride. I think that's a big one. And I think it even goes back to the story that I shared, is I was willing to step into the ministry and the mission of Jesus, but I had pride there. I felt like where I was good enough. I felt like what I knew was good enough. And there was an ulterior motive that was self-satisfying for who I was going to share the gospel with. I think one of the hardest things to do is to say the words, I don't know. And I think it's pride that gets in our way there. Yeah. And I think when it comes to this mission, I think that's one of the best things to be willing to say and be willing to set aside. The Bible, when you hold it, it's a smaller book. There's 66 books in it. Right. But when I first picked it up, I didn't know everything in it. Right. I still don't know everything in it. Right. I'll be studying it the rest of my life. But the pride that I had going into that first time of sharing the gospel, knowing that I barely studied that thing and just thought that I was going to be able to wing it and go for it. I think it showed a lot of pride in me. And I think one of the big things for me that was humbling in that was, okay, I don't know this stuff. I need to set this aside and be willing to learn it, and do what it takes to learn it. We offer I'll just weave this in. We offer,
throw it in there. I know where you're going.
We offer a course here at Three Circle Church on how to share the gospel. And what's wild about that course is it's 2 hours, start to finish, and you're going to walk away not knowing how to share the gospel.
All right, you got to explain that for me.
Yeah. You're going to walk away with hopefully the idea that we're going to break down some of the strongholds that prevent you from sharing the gospel.
Yeah, I hear you.
And then we're going to give you the tools, like, hey, these are the tools you need to start working on. But the thing about it is you're not going to walk away from a 2-hour class. You're not going to walk away from one sermon and be fully prepared and equipped for this mission. This mission is something that we're going to prepare for the rest of our lives. Right. I look at the words of Paul, and Paul talks about the sword of the Spirit and the armor of God, and he's referencing these Roman centurion soldiers, these professional warriors that spent their entire life perfecting their craft, and literally lived their life for that purpose and mission. And every day they would wake up, and every day they would train, and every day they would practice. And this is the terminology that Paul uses towards us and our mission and the tools that we have and the things that we use to prepare and the weapons that we have to wage war. And we talk about this in the gospel class, but I think it's a massive undertaking to say that you want to go on this mission. And I think the first thing I would set aside is that pride to think that you have the skills and say like, no, I need to go in and I need to learn and I need to prepare. And I think the other thing that we'd set aside in step with that, based on what I just said too, is that it's not a moment, but it's a lifetime.
Right.
It's not something that you're gonna do and then be done.
Right.
It's something that you spend the rest of your life doing. And man, it is such an honor. Like, I think when you look at it that way, it first seems like a responsibility. You know, like, oh gosh, like because I confess the name of Jesus, like I have to do this stuff. No, you get to.
Yeah, right.
Like we've literally been invited to be a part of the greatest story ever told.
Yeah.
And that's that adventure that we were talking about. Like we literally get to be one of the main characters.
Right.
Like I'll go nerdy again.
Yeah.
But like we're in the fellowship of the ring.
It's better than that.
Right? It's better.
Yeah.
Like you get to watch a movie like that and be like, they're going to Mordor, they're doing this stuff,
Right.
they're defeating evil, and you're like, there's these 9 guys, you know, in this group that are doing something so cool. And I think we always watch that from the sidelines. Any action movie like that, we'll watch it from the sidelines, being like, man, that's what I want. No, as Christians, we're a part of that group.
Right.
We're a part of the team that's going to go and do the thing.
Yeah.
And man, it's so amazing when you change your perspective from responsibility to privilege and realize that you are playing a part in the greatest story ever told.
That's good.
So
I love that you said that, and I'll finish this out with this. A good friend of mine from the Daphne campus, one of our members there, he was telling me the other day, he said, you know, I've got this friend of mine. He's like, you know, I can invite him over to help us do this thing that we're about to do or whatever. And he's like, he's one of my lost friends. And I was like, okay, that's neat. He's like, years ago, I prayed to God and I was like, God, can you send me 3 lost friends? And he's like, so I built relationships with some individuals that don't know Christ. And I thought it was so interesting. He said, but God gave me 7. God gave me 7 friends that I know I need to share the gospel with. And I know this guy. I can tell you, he takes advantage of the opportunities.
that's awesome.
And he is actively pursuing, you know, sharing Christ with them when he gets the opportunity. And so I thought it was so cool because even as a pastor, it challenged me to say, am I praying, God, open that door of opportunity. Send me some people that need the gospel. Because I know you're wired the same way, and many of the people that are here at 3 Circle, you know, they're wired this way. It's like, I want to see some people in eternity that I got to play a part of what led to them ending up there, right? I didn't save them. Don't get me wrong. We don't save them. We don't do any of that. We can't give anyone eternity, none of that stuff. But I would love to know that God used me to impact the reason why someone ended up in eternity because of their relationship with Jesus Christ.
100%.
So, well, hopefully this has been a encouragement to you. And we, you know, hope that you continue to grow in what your opportunities are. But Jourdain, is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Yeah, man. I just want to throw it out to all of our listeners that the next time we actually have that sharing the gospel training is June 23rd.
Okay.
So it's coming up.
Okay.
And it's on a Sunday, 4 p.m. So come to church.
4 to 6,
Yeah,
2 hours.
2 hours. Come to church. Go get lunch with the family. Get everyone settled. Come on back. And you can get signed up on our website right now. So I'd love to just extend an invite for you guys to take that next step.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So get in that training if you haven't already, and let that be step 1 of getting you equipped with what you need to get out there and impact the lives of others for eternity. Let's not lose that perspective.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this has been an encouragement to you and that you take something away from this that you can apply to your own personal walk with Christ. And we look forward to being with you next time, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
That's it.